versus originality. The future of content in the age of ChatGPT and deepfake technology. The panelist is Rourke Wilson, associate at the digital law company. The moderator is Guillermo Musipele, producer and presenter at CNBC Africa. Generative AI is rapidly reshaping how we create, consume, and trust content. Tools like ChatGPT, Grok, and a growing wave of AI-driven platforms can now produce articles, simulate voices, generate hyper-realistic images, and even fabricate convincing videos in a matter of seconds. But as these technologies become more accessible and more powerful, they pose a profound threat to originality, authorship, and truth. Across Africa, where journalism, academic research, and creative industries are already navigating tight budgets, misinformation threats, and digital disruption, the stakes couldn't be higher. In a world where machines can mimic human creativity without alarming accuracy, originality becomes highly valuable. For content creators, journalists, and researchers across Africa, reputation and content protection is crucial. Because building regulatory frameworks that are not only ethical, but practical and enforceable in a fast-moving online ecosystem has become crucial. Balancing innovation, creativity is key in the age of AI as we move toward ownership and trust.
Rourke, more importantly, welcome to the stage. And we're well within some of the conversations that have been had about artificial intelligence. When I bring you in, you stand between the segue of technology and law. And while your earlier work was premised on the responsible use of social media in the workplace, here comes the advancement of artificial intelligence and how it continues to entrench itself. Now, when we look at the particular topic for the day, from your perspective, what do you make of how deeply intertwined artificial intelligence is becoming with how people consume content?
Thank you so much for having me, Guillermo. And yeah, as you said, I have had to do a bit of a pivot. My speciality is in social media law, and in the past few years, we've just seen AI proliferate, especially with how powerful ChatGPT has gotten, how accessible these tools are, and how I'm able to pivot as well is because there isn't essentially any AI law. And like with social media, which developed very quickly, our legal systems have to catch up. And that means we have to use pre-existing principles, which exist in our common law system, the principles of Roman law that we've adopted. And frankly, it's interesting and fascinating. And I do think, thankfully, South Africa is maybe better placed than other jurisdictions because of the emphasis that we have on individual rights, especially considering our past.
Yeah. I actually really want to expand on how you then compare the African continent to the rest of the globe. There has been mention on regulation, but particularly in this context, while we apply artificial intelligence within our working lives, what then do we make of the current jurisdiction? Are there processes, guardrails in place?
There are some, but there isn't enough if we think about just how much disruption there's going to cause. I mean, if we look at Denmark, all of their entire population has been granted copyright to their own face, and that's a step that they had to go in and make in order to protect their citizens against many of the dangers that now come with deepfake image proliferation. And in South Africa, thankfully, we already have precedents such as Basi Khumalo's case against Cycle South Africa, which reiterated that we as South Africans have a right to our image, and then we've got recourse for that legally if anyone uses our image without our consent, particularly in that case to market their business.
And another interesting conversation that I'm eager to explore, when we particularly look at my industry, media, as other industries are at helm of taking advantage of this tool, where does the responsibility lie? Because media can or is a reflection onto society. So from a legal perspective, where does the onus lie?
We are still figuring that out, honestly. I mean, and as you said, there's going to be massive disruption that comes from this. We already saw it start 10 years ago. So like, let's take Google as an example. Google's a search engine. We use it to find what information we want. And if you look back 10, 15 years ago, Google used to pride itself on how quickly they could get you off of their website, which is very weird for social media. Usually they want to keep you on there. But when it came to Google, the idea was we want to give you the information that you're looking for. So come to our website, look what you're looking for, and get off as quickly as possible. But then about 10 years ago, that little card came up. So let's say you Googled yourself. It'd come up with your name, your face, maybe your birthday, so that you can get the information more quickly accessible. And what I think they were preparing to do was to start introducing AI in the way that we see it now. Now, Google isn't the Google that I grew up with, where you get the information you're looking for. You get an AI summary then of what Google has found, and that has so many implications, especially for people in the media space, where you might rely then on those clicks, on those traffics to generate other business. And we've had a similar sort of case brought by our competition commission against, I believe it was Meta, for the disruption that they've done to media and the loss of profits that came to those companies. So if we look to South Africa, we're definitely at least trying to say that it is those companies that is responsible for causing those losses when it comes to disruption. The problem is then, how do we enforce it? Because the commission made their big statement, but there's been very little since.
Yeah, but whenever you explore anything in business, there is an associated risk. So then how do you advise decision makers who are keen to embrace the tool?
I'd advise them to look very carefully at the EU AI Act. And why I say that is because, like the General Data Protection Regulations, it's got extraterritorial control. So if you are ever dealing with the data of an EU data subject, and if we're thinking about putting things online, you have to assume that a European person is going to access that content, to be looking at what you're putting out there. I think a great place to start looking is the EU AI Act, which is a fantastic regulation that categorizes AI according to risk and then puts certain obligations on you for those risks. And we've got our own commission going through to create an AI policy for South Africa, and I have a feeling that's going to look very similar to what's being done in the EU.
Yeah. And another interesting use of artificial intelligence in your personal capacity and within the use of deepfakes is how they have managed to filter into more vulnerable populations. So what I'm saying is young people, very young people, children, or the inverse, the elderly, are then vulnerable to bad actors. Do you have a rule book in place for the average person on how they can navigate this space?
On the average person using AI themselves,
Yeah.
I would say just first and foremost, be a good person. That will help you keep out of a lot of trouble. Don't go and generate nudes of your coworkers, and then you won't get into trouble for generating nudes of your coworkers. And I say that, don't go and do that, but there was a review done on 15,000 AI-generated images, and 96% of them were nude images. So the first thing I would say is be a good person. Secondly is be aware of the limitations of this thing. You mentioned vulnerable populations. There have been 12 cases this year of people being admitted for AI-induced psychosis. So it's be aware of your own, and in that it isn't the AI that's causing the psychosis. A lot of these people are already at risk. But the problem is if you've got someone who's got a bit of a suspended idea of reality now engaging with what is basically a yes-man machine.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have noticed, but ChatGPT really gasses you up when you speak to it. So if you've got a bit of a worldview that doesn't align with the truth, it can be really dangerous in that capacity. So be aware of your limitations, be a good person, and also be careful.
Yeah.
I think we've learned again and again from just watching how Meta and other big tech companies conduct themselves. We are not their client. We're their potential source of money making. And especially when we've got something like ChatGPT, where it's so easy, it's so human sounding, it's so easy to start getting personal and give up pieces of yourself. Be careful with what you're doing there.
Yeah. And then how are they able to advise their children? I know you do, or the work you do, you give talks to young children on their use of social media. How do you then apply it to this context?
Firstly, that's a lot of the advice that we give is actually parenting advice, and it's don't be too hard on your kids with this. Open a conversation up with them about it. Don't go and be that parent that says, oh no, don't use AI. They're going to ignore you and go and use AI now. Rather be curious, engage with them about how they're using it, and through conversation, start highlighting the issues that they might be presenting, whether they're relying on it totally for their work and not doing any of effectively plagiarizing. Try to help them understand the skills that they're supposed to be learning through engaging with the schoolwork.
Yeah. And another key concern, or something that a lot of people caution, is particularly the advancement of artificial intelligence in the global south. Within the current space that we're operating in, you've mentioned AI-induced psychosis, and it is a question Palisa also posed, that if this AI-generated tool advises me not to seek necessary healthcare, if I'm in a situation where AI is working against me, where do I go?
I mean, I think it entirely depends on the capacity in which you're engaging with it. I think that if there are people engaging with AI as a therapist now, genuinely, I don't think there would be much recourse for them, especially because we've had Sam Altman himself come out in an interview say, please don't use ChatGPT as a therapist. But beyond that, you'd likely have to rely on product liability and our Consumer Protection Act. If you look at the EU as well, they're creating a different framework, which I think we should follow, which puts more of the onus on the company that is developing these tools, especially when you're creating something that effectively is supposed to go and make something new. There should be a lot more caution, a lot more regulation, because when there's space for something new to happen, there's space for anything to happen. And when anything happens, something very good can happen, but also something very bad.
Yeah. And I want to know, and as we continue on with this conversation, what do you think government or cabinet or people in positions to create new laws can do to effectively safeguard this space?
I think it's going to have to be two-pronged. Firstly, we do need to move quickly in many ways, but we need to be careful of that. When governments move quickly, we get worries about fascism and overreach and things like that. So move quickly in creating policies and frameworks that can help guide our development and make sure that we're developing with the right principles in mind. And again, I mentioned the EU AI Act again. That is I think a really good example of it. And they put AI on 4 levels of risk, from very high risk to very low risk. And on the high risk end, we've got like I forgot the name of the movie now, where they use the AI policing, and it accuses the wrong guy. Predictive policing. Basically, anything that it involves around predicting if you will become a criminal is now totally banned. However, if you look on the lower end of that, we've got regulations we've got AI such as Google's autocomplete. That in itself is AI. You put in a few words and it tries to figure out what sentence you're trying to say. But that's considered a very low risk one. So I think what our ministers will need to do is really put time and effort into understanding what these systems are. And I think a lot of problems will come from a lack of understanding of what these systems are, a well-rounded understanding of what they're actually capable of, and then regulating within that.
Yeah. So I get the sense that there's a lot of personal work or personal onus on you as the user of this tool, and you should be aware of some of the potential risks that are at play. But just shortly, I'm told I am out of time. We've discussed the use, whether it be in industries, whether it be at the workplace, or whether it be young children. But how can you briefly tell us how the average person can future-proof their use of AI?
I would say, firstly, go and learn about how to properly prompt a model. I think in the process of learning how to prompt a model, you start to understand what it's actually made for, how it can properly help you. So that then can help you discern what information you're actually putting into that. We are helping these companies amass vast amounts of data, and we need to be mindful of what we're putting in for ourselves there. Secondly, go and read the terms of service and understand what that company's liabilities to you are, because I can assure you there are very, very little, unless there is maybe a data breach and some of your stuff gets leaked. But if it tells you to do anything, or if you go and you take in its advice, or take, for example, the lawyers which have used legal AI to help draft papers, they're the AI hallucinated cases, and it isn't the model that is now being referred to the practice council, it's the lawyers themselves. At the end of the day, you are the human being that has to make the decision. We can't tell an AI accountable doesn't have personality. So it needs to be you that's making the decision, you that's making the calls, you who is using your human decision power to make sure that you are not doing anything harmful or putting yourself at risk.
Yeah. I find it quite interesting. All throughout today, there have been so many new problems that have been cited about the use of AI that I don't think we could have imagined or predicted, whether it be that they are attorneys quoting fictitious cases or the erosion of retention and memory. I personally feel we have been robbed of our time. I could go on and on about this conversation, but that's unfortunately where we have to leave it. Thank you so much, Rourke, for your time and your insights. Please give my panelists a round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks so much.